Right way is not very difficult to define because if you can build a flying car, that should be the right way, right? There obviously may be technological or realistic constraints, but I think the key success to optimism is those repeated small successes. The more confidence and smaller successes enable you to build that resilience. So through challenges, maybe you become more optimistic. Yeah, my name is David Lee. I'm the CEO and founder of IYUNO. We are by far the largest media localization company in the world with the boom of video streaming services that went global. It's not just a translation that we do. Through this localization, we need to make the viewers laugh, cry, or even scream. It's really the recreation of the emotions, the context. We work with Netflix, Amazon, Disney, Viacom, Sony Pictures, HBO, and we, on an annual basis, produce around 600,000 running time hours of localization services per year. I'd probably want to go back to my elementary school days. When I was in first grade, actually, my dad was, I guess, really supportive and he bought me this computer. So I was one of the early adopters, if you will. When I was in college, I think my passion was to major mechanical engineering in graduate school and probably and hopefully work at NASA. But interim period, I somehow started this interim career, which became my permanent career. I somehow got myself in doing some part-time work for this translation company, very small. And it's funny because this owner wasn't paying very well. My colleagues who were working at that small company, we decided, let's just do our thing. Let's go out. I had about 6 months before I would fly in for graduate school, and it was a very modest start. 3 founders paid up about $2,000 each by cash advance, and we just got this very small office because it was only going to be a 6 to 8 month career. The first business we got was subtitling for DVD. I guess because of my engineering background and my computer geek background, I was developing these small pieces of software that would automate some of the processes in that work. How I used to subtitle, because I was a subtitler, was I put a VHS tape in the machine. I play, rewind, because you can't really hear at once, right? And obviously that was a very inefficient process. Linear broadcast environment, we're moving on to nonlinear, which is computer files. It was obvious for me to develop a software whereby we would record that VHS tape into a file, load it up to the software, and then press a key that would punch in the time codes. And then you just type your subtitle and you would send that file where now the client who receives those files would then be able to just feed it in and the subtitles would automatically be in the place where they should be. That was a very small problem that we solved, but we reduced about 30% of the time and cost that was put in. And we were very successful in a way. But after 8 months, we realized we were losing a lot of money. Of course, you may ask me, why did you lose so much money when you were successful? But they weren't paying very well. And I guess things are different in Korea now, but back then, there were a lot of clients that were. And then I lost all my employees because they went out and they built another company. We decided that we're not going to do DVD subtitling anymore. I thought broadcasters are bigger. So we moved over to cable broadcasters. And luckily, they paid a little bit better than DVD companies. When it was about 8 years since I started, even with cable broadcasters, we weren't very profitable and the price competition was still pretty intense. I guess a little bit cruel. We had an exclusive contract with this client and I didn't go to his wedding. Not his wedding, his mother-in-law's funeral. We somehow started losing business. The business was going down. They were giving it to another competitor. And I was chasing and he wasn't answering my calls. And one day he popped up and he said, I was very disappointed you didn't show up to my mother-in-law's funeral. And that was the reason we got cut off. And they were 50% of our revenues. I don't think this should be broadcasted because I don't want to offend Korean viewers. I'm sure it's a lot different now, but it was a much more demanding market and highly competitive market because Korean people are very passionate. What we then decided was that we would go international because we couldn't really see ourselves as a single language provider. Our only international client then was Discovery Asia. They were based out of Singapore. It was pretty obvious for me to head to Singapore as next step. I think I did right was for myself to relocate there rather than sending someone there. I think for you to live that difference is very important for you to start building that openness. Even the people who you might think are open that are not exposed to that international business practices tend to think very locally, leverage that difference to build a core or unique company culture rather than building a company culture and forcing that to the different parts of the world world where they have different practices, usually that results in resistances and failures. And for you to build that openness and really be able to communicate globally. And that's not just with your employees. Any business, any size, the leader has to be a salesperson, right? So either sell to the investors or sell to the clients or sell to the employees. To build that embracement for different is the key factor, and that enabled us to access that client. So I think that physical presence for any business is very important. By the time about 10 months after I moved to Singapore, Sony was launching a channel that was going to only air Korean contents. The problem they had was they had to somehow transfer these very, very heavy video files, which are very high resolution, over to Singapore. I offered them that if you guys use us, we would have our Korean office take your files. We would use regular internet to transfer those files to Singapore and then deliver you in forms of portable hard drives. So for about 2 years, I was delivering portable hard drives to Sony, which was 5-minute, 10-minute distance from my home, but that got us the deal. And they first launched in Malaysia. Initially, we used a vendor, a Malaysian company, to do localization. And then within about 3 months, we decided, let's launch our own office. That somehow became our playbook to win the business first, use a vendor, and then, with that profit, we would build our own operations. And then I would go to another client and say, now we have a Malaysia office. We're providing Malaysian services. I think that playbook somehow, within about 4 to 5 years, took us to Asia's strongest player. And we became known to the other parts of the world as a strong Asian player as well. I think the second wave was when Netflix was going global. So when Reed Hastings announced that they would launch in 100-something countries, we got into those opportunities and we successfully delivered it. So we became a very strong service provider and partner, and that really brought us to the next level. By the time we were scaling up as an Asian regional localization company, we decided we couldn't do these with spreadsheets anymore. So we started developing our supply chain management software, which is really a cloud-based platform where that would visualize our different offices and where the workflows are. There were competitors who were non-cloud based, but it was very obvious for us to build a cloud platform because we were internationally operational. And to maximize utilization of our resources was very important for us. Office in Singapore, to be able to, if they're low on volume, to support other offices was the right optimization, right? So for that to happen, it had to be a one workplace for every office to plug in, access, and share those workloads. The first piece of subtitling software that I developed was offline software. The problem I faced when we were really small was that these translators are normally part-timers, and we have due dates to our clients. So we give the work to a subtitler, and all of a sudden he shuts down his phone. He would never answer, right? This translator had the script, and that was the only script. I drove to the home at like 10 p.m. and pressing on the doorbell, and then she came out and gave me back my script. And obviously, it's very irresponsible. They could just say, no, I don't want to do it, and send it back. Then we get into chaos. So for us to be able to visualize what he's doing was very important. And that was the main reason I wanted to build a cloud software, because in a cloud software, it's like Google Docs, right? If you're typing something into Google Docs, I can see it. Every business is different nowadays, right? There's growth themed businesses, but our business is pretty straightforward. You can't do quantum J curves in our business. You get a certain amount of revenue. Normally you can expect that. And then it's all about cost optimization, because that's the only way you can make profit. So you could either use technology to make yourself efficient and make sure your resources are all utilized, right? The nature of the business is get the best price and to optimize your cost. When we became the strongest player in Asia, we had to go to Europe or US. In US, we had a small office back then. So obviously Europe is a very different world, and we didn't think it was easy to go organically into those regions. So the right path was to go there through acquisitions. We were confident that if we buy a studio, we could plug them into our platform because we had technologies that could do things very efficiently, and they would provide some client access. And somehow we were thinking of those synergies. I was a very close friend with JP, who now heads SoftBank Ventures, and he was impressed with accomplishments that we've done. So that was our first funding, which was in 2018. So we started in 2002. So it was about 16 years of organic growth. Then followed by a mega merger with this European player called BTI. BTI was a much bigger company. It was about 3 times bigger than us in terms of revenue. Eventually it became a sort of a one-to-one swap merger, then becoming one of the 2 global players. The other player was SCI, and there was us. And then came COVID. I was always meeting up up with the owners of STI back then, who during COVID wanted to sell the company. By then we brought in SoftBank Vision Fund. They trusted the story, they believed in the story of consolidation, and they came in and effectively funded the acquisition of STI. So we merged and we became the biggest player. So like I said, now we become a much bigger platform because we have access to the biggest clients around the world. We have very strong technology bases, economy of scale, so we're cost efficient in terms of providing centralized back-end functions like finances or technology. So our playbook is to acquire these studios and continue to build capacity, as well as if we're not providing a certain language for a client, it's very obvious for us to acquire a studio that's well established in a region and propose that service to a client and grow ourselves. Right way is not very difficult to define, because if you can build a flying car, that should be the right way, right? If you think video streaming over internet is better than delivering videotapes through packages, I mean, if you think about the ultimatum of things, right? There obviously may be technological or realistic constraints, but those paths are pretty obvious in whichever industry you're in. For us to be able to connect people through accessibility to other languages and to deliver the original content creator's intent effectively is our vision. I guess those are pretty obvious, but once you're in that journey and you go through these small successes or big successes, I think naturally you get more confidence in what you do, and the more confidence and smaller successes enable you to build that resilience. So through challenges, maybe you become more optimistic, and in a way, those experiences enable you to be less burdened by those responsibilities. I think any entrepreneur, either overly confident or they're, way too inconfident, but I think the right balance is always important. It's important to be humble, but then if you're in an industry for a lot of years and you understand the dynamics very well, and you know where this industry should head, and you know you're capable of delivering that, well, obviously we're in a really good position now to become that strategic partner for our clients, and I think that's going to deliver a lot of growth for the company. On the other hand, there are a lot of other medias that require localization, which may be the YouTubers, the e-learnings, the games. So for us to be able to be that front runner, we're in the process of developing a more platformized, where you can plug in your contents and then it will run through the engines and the resources in an automated manner. It won't be a highly tailored creative service like for the major broadcasters. 10 years down the road, maybe we'll continue to become the world's largest media localization player, but at the same time, we'll have a significant amount of business in the content distribution world. We'll also have a significant, well-established platform where anyone, literally anyone can, and you guys as well, can plug in your content and it will come out with localized versions. I think entrepreneurship is a master art. You gotta be master in everything, right? You gotta be your Superman. It doesn't mean that you're gonna solve all the problems. Like I said, to bring in the best people that are smarter than you, that are better than you is important. Am I happy? I'm very happy. I'm very happy. After all those years, where we are and where we're headed, it's still gonna be a very exciting journey. I know we have a lot of problems every day, and any company should have a lot of problems, but we're getting better. Over those years, I tend not to be urged about things. As long as we're getting better, slow and steady wins the race has been my game. And this company is already pretty big, so as long as we do our things right day to day, and that's the part of the journey. I mean, it's meaningful because it comes after those challenges. And if I was in my 20s, I don't know. I mean, like I said, it wasn't my whole passion to start the business. I was sort of brought into this fate. No matter how small or how big the business is, it's very difficult for 100% of everyone to be aligned to your thoughts or your directions or your vision, right? Everybody has different thoughts, and I don't think that's bad, because those other opinions tend to balance out and correct if in case the directions or the tactics or the strategies are wrong. But I guess delivering for people to be excited about the journey, that's a very important thing for morale, and morale is everything. I think culture is everything, right? Obviously that vision has to be shareable and understandable by the employees. You can't just say off thing that nobody's gonna, what are you talking about? These sort of things, right? So vision to be detailed and in line with the interests of the employees is very important. Their personal career and personal interest is very important. And of course, your vision, obviously growth has to be in line with that. How you get there is more strategic, and that vision to come with the details of your strategy in getting there, I think is important. Now, once you form that story, one of the core roles as a CEO is to repeat your story again, 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 and again, right? Whether those are investors or employees or clients. That's my daily job. What your surprise is, especially when you're multicultural, is that your vision doesn't really deliver as per your expectation. So people may not join the town hall. People are just not engaged. The only way out of it is just pure repetition. So internal communication is very important for our company. And we've had numerous experiences, where we've announced something, but it was never delivered. And honestly, the best solution that we've come up with was to repeat it. So again and again and again.